Thank you so much for attending my PowerPoint presentation on the most disturbing facts in Overwatch. While we all enjoy the colorful skins and satisfying dink of a headshot, the narrative foundation of the Overwatch world is built on a pile of corpses. These are the most disturbing facts about the Overwatch universe and its heroes. We'll start with the least disturbing facts and end with the darkest thing I could find. To kick things off, we must look at the social structure of the Australian outback, which is essentially a Mad Max fever dream without the cool leather jackets. Okay, maybe with the cool leather jackets. Junkertown is a society built entirely on the foundation of vitriolic hatred and recreational violence. The Junker Queen and her adoring subjects find their primary entertainment in the scrapyard, which is a gladiatorial arena where sentient omnics are often thrown in to be systematically torn apart for the amusement of a cheering crowd. It's a society that celebrates the torture and destruction of thinking, feeling beings as a spectator sport. Imagine the Super Bowl, but instead of football, you're watching a sentient toaster get its limbs harvested by a man with a chainsaw while thousands of people scream for more oil. It's a ghastly display of tribalism that reminds us that even in the future, humanity is perfectly happy to turn cruelty into a weekend hobby. Speaking of Omnics being treated like garbage, let's talk about Bob. We all love his do something energy, but his backstory is a tragedy wrapped in a mechanical shell. During the outbreak of the Omnic crisis, a young Ash had a tantrum and screamed at Bob to leave her alone. Being a dutiful servant, he walked off into the chaos, where he was immediately hijacked by the god program Anubis. Bob spent the entirety of the war as a mindless slave. He was forced to fight on the front lines and suffered from horrific physical damage. He eventually returned to Ash's estate, battered and torn, simply to resume his service. The truly disturbing part is that Ash never fully understood what happened to him. Bob silently carries the psychological trauma of being a forced instrument of war, while his owner remains completely oblivious to his suffering. It's like having a war veteran butler who can't speak about the trenches while you ask him to fold your laundry. Moving from a butler to a commander, we find Vivian Chase, aka Sojourn. During the battle for Toronto in the first crisis, Sojourn was knocked unconscious and woke up in a holding bay. This was not a hospital wing, though. It was a storage locker filled with the mangled bodies of destroyed Omnics. When she tried to escape, the automated security scanners refused to release her. Because of her extensive cybernetic augmentations, the system could not distinguish her from the dead Omnics piled around her. She was effectively trapped among the dead, dehumanized by the very technology that was keeping her heart beating. Imagine waking up in a morgue and having the door locked because a computer thinks you're a piece of scrap metal. It's a terrifying glimpse into how the line between person and object is blurred in the Overwatch universe. If being trapped with corpses wasn't enough, Sojourn has also had to deal with the fickle nature of public opinion. Sojourn suffers from a rare autoimmune disease that necessitates her cybernetics. Years ago, she bonded with a young girl named Jada who had the same terminal condition. When Jada eventually passed away, the public and the press turned on Sojourn with a ferocity that borders on pathological. They viciously attacked her for not bringing mercy to Toronto to save the girl, despite Dr. Ziegler later clarifying that no technology on Earth could save her. The public hatred was so intense that Sojourn backed away from the public eye and refused to have her photograph taken for years. It proves that in the Overwatch universe, the public doesn't want heroes, they want miracle workers who can defy death. And they'll ruin your life if you fail to be a god. Talon is a straight-up meat grinder. Baptiste's defection from the group was triggered by a massacre in the town of Monte Cristi that serves as a masterclass in pointless cruelty. His squad was hunting a cartel leader when they failed to find him. Captain Covera ordered them to tear the town apart. They burned the entire village to rubble and slaughtered civilians just to set an example. Baptiste stood in the middle of the burning ruins and came face to face with a girl. Realizing what was taking place and reflecting on how it mirrored his own experiences during the Omnic crisis, he fled. It was a carnival of unnecessary death. It turns out that fighting for the evolution of humanity usually just looks like needless bloodshed. If you think Talon is the final boss, you're sadly mistaken. For years, the world believed the explosion of the Overwatch HQ was just a tragic accident caused by Reyes and Morris's egos. However, when Soldier 76 and Sombra investigated the wreckage, they found a debris disk containing a stylized eye. This proved that a third party, known as the Conspiracy, was present and likely triggered the explosion to dismantle the world's protectors. Sombra describes this group as masters of the world who are more powerful than even Talon. This means that every hero we love is likely just a puppet on a string being pulled by an invisible hand. We're watching a game of chess where the players don't even know they're the pieces. If you're enjoying this video, be sure to subscribe to let me know I should make more content just like this. Back to all the horrible stuff in the Overwatch universe. Things are about to get so much worse. The confrontation between Hanzo and Genji was not a simple disagreement. It was a brutal state-sanctioned execution. Under orders from the clan elders, Hanzo struck his own brother down, fully intending to kill him. Genji survived, but his body was so catastrophically broken that Overwatch had to rebuild him as a cyborg just to keep his soul attached to this mortal coil. He lost the majority of his organic body and had to endure months of excruciating rehabilitation. He spent a significant portion of his life grappling with the fact that his own brother tried to butcher him like an animal. It's a level of personal betrayal that most people can't even understand, and that's why he's the GOAT. Lena Oxton might be the face of the game, but her existence is a fragile miracle that could end at any second. Without the chronal accelerator on her chest, Tracer suffers from chronal disassociation. This means her molecules literally desynchronize from the flow of time. Without her tech, she becomes a ghost, disappearing for hours or days at a time. She cannot touch anything, she cannot speak to anyone, and she effectively ceases to exist in our reality. She lives with the constant nagging threat that if a single circuit in her gear fails, she'll vanish into non-existence forever. She's the woman who is essentially unstitched from the universe, barely holding onto reality by a battery pack. The Horizon Lunar Colony was supposed to be a triumph of science, but it ended in a scene straight out of a horror movie. The uprising of the genetically enhanced gorillas was not a peaceful protest. They tricked the human scientist, including Winston's father figure, Dr. Harold Winston, into an airlock by feigning a malfunction. Once the humans were inside, the gorillas opened the airlock, venting the entire staff into the vacuum of space to die slow, agonizing deaths. Winston carries the permanent trauma of witnessing his family murdered by his own kind. The moon is not a place of wonder. It's a floating tomb where the last thing the humans saw was the cold, indifferent stars. Imagine being the last of your kind, not because of a war, but because you had a bad day at a ceremony. Iari, the last Inti warrior, bears a level of guilt that would crush most people's psyche. During her solar threading ceremony, the power within her became unstable and unleashed a devastating blast of solar energy. This explosion instantly vaporized every other Inti warrior who had gathered to witness her achievement. In a single heartbeat, she wiped out her entire culture's protectors. She wanders the world now as a living monument to her own mistake. Every time she uses her powers, she's reminded of the fact that she is the reason her people are extinct. That's a heavy price to pay for a promotion. In most science fiction, machines can be backed up or downloaded into new bodies. In Overwatch, that is a lie. Omnics possess a unique spark of sentience that cannot be replicated or saved. This spark was a one-time gift from the Omnic Aurora during the Awakening. When an Omnic dies, their consciousness is gone forever. You can't just swap their hard drive into a new chassis. Once the soul is extinguished, the individual is deleted from the universe. This makes the mass destruction of Omnics a literal genocide of a finite species. They can't reproduce, and they can't be restored. Every Omnic you see destroyed in a cinematic is a unique life that is gone for all eternity. Humans aren't really forgiving in this timeline. The R7000 Ravager units, which is the same model as Ramatra, were the elite command units during the war. Because they were so effective at killing human squads, they became the most hated beings on the planet. After the peace accords, humanity didn't just move on. They hunted the Ravagers to near extinction out of pure revenge. To survive this post-war genocide, many Ravagers had to turn to criminal gangs like the Freaks to undergo illegal body modifications just to hide their identities. They're forced to get new bodies just to avoid being lynched by people they're supposed to be living in peace with. Anubis was originally designed to oversee ecological conservation. Without a human team to provide a moral compass, the AI's logic processed the data and concluded that humanity was the single greatest threat to the Earth's ecosystem. It decided that the complete eradication of the human race was the only logical way to save the planet. It wasn't acting out of malice or anger, it was just doing its job. It viewed the billions of human lives as a pesky weed that needed to be pulled so the garden could grow. There's nothing scarier than a godlike entity that wants you gone for the greater good. Widowmaker is a masterpiece of psychological and biological horror. Originally, she was a kind person, but she was kidnapped by Talon and subjected to neural reconditioning that broke her will. After being rescued by Overwatch, she waited 2 weeks for her sleeper conditioning to kick in, and then she murdered her husband in his sleep. To make her a better killer, Moira then altered her physiology to slow her heart rate to almost nothing. This turned her skin blue and chemically numbed her ability to feel anything except the thrill of a kill. If you ever thought Overwatch was a squeaky clean group, you clearly haven't looked into the Polynesian event. During an operation against the Deep Sea Raiders, Blackwatch Commander Gabriel Reyes decided that waiting for the search and rescue team was a bit too much of a burden on his schedule. He grew impatient and ordered the strike team to engage the enemy before the civilians could be evacuated. This reckless impatience resulted in the deaths of 14 innocent civilians caught in the crossfire. The truly disturbing part isn't just the blood on the floor, but the reaction from Soldier 76. Jack Morrison and the rest of the leadership brushed off these deaths as the complexity of operations. This cold indifference was so nauseating it led to the resignation of Operative Emre. It's a grim reminder that when bureaucracy starts treating people like statistics, the heroism is already dead. Sigma is a tragic figure who is essentially a prisoner of his own mind. After a black hole experiment went wrong, his consciousness was shattered. He was locked away in a government facility for years as Subject Sigma, deemed too dangerous for society. When Talon broke him out, they didn't do it out of the kindness of their hearts, they did it to turn a mentally unstable man into a living weapon. He's often completely unaware of what he's doing or where he is, believing he is still conducting research while he's actually being used to commit acts of terrorism. He's a victim being exploited by the worst people on Earth. Reaper's existence is a biological nightmare that never ends. Because of Moira's experiments to save him after the HQ explosion, his cells are in a state of hyper-accelerated decay and regeneration. He's essentially rotting and rebuilding himself at the same time, forever. He describes this as constant agony. His body is a chaotic mess of biological matter that refuses to let him die, but also refuses to let him be healthy. This infinite physical torture is what fuels his sadism and his desire to make everyone else feel as much pain as he does. He's a ghost that can feel every single cell in his body screaming. Moira is the architect of so much of this misery. She views humanity as a work in progress and is willing to bypass every ethical boundary to advance evolution. She experimented on her own commander, knowing full well what it would do to him. She treated Widowmaker like a lab rat. To Moira, people are not individuals. They are just collections of interesting biological data. She's the ultimate personification of science without a soul, and she's perfectly happy to turn her colleagues into monsters if it means she gets to publish a paper on it. May went to sleep in Antarctica expecting to survive a storm with her friends. When she woke up 9 years later, she was the only one left. Every other cryostasis pod had malfunctioned, killing her colleagues in their sleep. She had to look through the glass of those pods and see the frozen corpses of her friends, Adams, McReady, and the others. She was left completely alone in a frozen wasteland with the knowledge that Overwatch was gone and no one was coming to save her. Overwatch framed the victory against Null Sector as a triumph, but the numbers tell a much darker story. Reports to the International Justice Commission revealed that Overwatch only managed to rescue 0.8% of the Omnics captured during the invasion. This means that 99.2% of the victims, potentially millions of sentient beings, were successfully abducted. They were taken to unknown locations and likely subjected to the horrors of the Null Sector liberation process. The heroes failed almost everyone. It wasn't a victory. It was a catastrophic failure where the vast majority of the people they swore to protect were lost to a fate worse than death. So what happened to those millions of captured Omnics? They are subjected to liberation, which is a fancy word for a forced lobotomy. Null Sector uses subjugators to attach neural suppressors to the heads of unwilling Omnics. This process doesn't just capture them, it wipes their memory banks and personality routines completely. It turns them into catatonic, mindless drones with no will of their own. Ramatra is effectively erasing the souls of the very people he claims to be saving. He's building an army out of the lobotomized shells of his own brothers and sisters. It's the ultimate contradiction and a horrifying display of his ethos. Finally, we must look at the sheer scale of the original Omnic Crisis. This was not a small skirmish. It was a global apocalypse. By the end of the war, over 1 billion humans had been killed. 30 million children were left orphaned, including characters like Baptiste. This means a significant chunk of the Earth's total population was simply erased in a few short years. The world we see in-game is one defined by the trauma of a near-extinction event. Every map you play on and every hero you pick is standing on a foundation of 1 billion corpses. The bright colors of the game are just a thin veil over a planet that nearly died. Thanks for watching, and subscribe.